Um, yeah, the livestock industry itself still very robust, but I would say we're probably walking towards some slightly volatile times as far as pricing is going to go.
Hello, me folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. Today we are convening again. Only Dr. Bass and myself. How you doing, Dr. Bass?
Happy, hungry, healthy. Things are good. Things are good, man.
Awesome. We really missed you being on the podcast again. What we sat down for I don't know a couple hours during RMC this year. It seems like it was last year, but it was like pretty much a couple months away. So
Guys out in the meat business, folks out in the meat business, you know how time slips by, and
yeah,
yeah, that was a fantastic trip. The reciprocal meat conference in St. Paul, Minnesota. It was a great turnout, and hopefully, folks have been listening to the series of recordings that we did there the last few weeks, and a lot of amazing guests, and that just kind of sets us up for the next round of amazing guests. Francisco and I, we've been talking a little bit. We don't want to let too many surprises out of the bag, but
yeah,
definitely have some additional folks that we're lining up, and should be good interviews going
yeah,
forward. But today is just again two dudes talking about meat
yeah.
stuff. So
Two
yeah,
meatheads.
two meatheads.
Where are you at now? Are you at Tween?
Yeah, so I'm out of my offsite office. I'm in a hotel room in Twin Falls, Idaho, southern Idaho, kind of down in the center of the Magic Valley. They call it the Magic Valley, and a little history about that is, prior to the 1930s, this part of Idaho was pretty much high desert and not a lot of agriculture going on, other than maybe a few homesteads and some cattle ranches. And today, once humanity and science was able to collect water, store water, do a better job of that, the aquifers and aqueducts, canals, and irrigation systems were developed in the 30s, 40s, due to some great projects that water has become abundant down here in southern Idaho, and that literally turned the valley, the Magic Valley, into a magical place overnight because water showed up. And so just like that, that's kind of why they call it the Magic Valley. Water is now available, abundant, and has made this place a center of agriculture in Idaho. I'm down here right now. I just got a chance to walk through and tour with some former students of mine the True West beef plant, which is one of the newest large operations in the country, and really, really cool. It's very rare to be able to get a chance to see brand new facilities up in operation, and it's neat to see the team. It's neat to see the new team members that the company has brought on, and to kind of see things from the ground up. And they're definitely ramping up, and things look very positive for it.
Awesome. How many head are they processing a
Yeah, they're
day?
about a little over 300 head a day right now, and that a lot of that has to do with just the similar struggles that most processors have out there right now. Just trying to find the workforce, train the workforce, and they're doing the best they can in an area where there's a lot of agriculture, a lot of processing going on, especially dairy. But this is a beef processor, which means a lot of training that's going on, and it's so cool to see um, the leadership at that facility. They're not just in an office; they're in the plant. I saw the guy with the highest ranking hat in the plant, and he had knives on, and he was right there, shoulder to shoulder with all the kind of new trainee folks, and so really neat to see. I highly encourage anybody that's out there, if you're starting up a plant or just looking at bringing new folks on, nothing um, fortifies, nothing bolsters the connection with the new employees than more so than if you have the big bosses out there and showing them, hey, I can do this too. and showing them that we're not afraid to get in there, get work done, um, and that I think that's really inspiring.
Yeah, I think that that really creates more empathy and just being on the queue floor or being on the processing floor. I just
Mhm.
and I'm amazed. That's not very typical. That's someone right in the high on the high end of the spectrum in terms of people like in the administration in the
Yeah,
company, CEOs, CFOs,
leadership.
and that's yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. But that's leading from the front right there. I mean, that is such a it's such a beautiful metaphor, honestly, in the physical form. It's really really cool. So yeah.
And I guess we can. I just crossed my mind, and it's okay if I mean I know we spoke with last year with Dr. Hauser,
Hmm.
and something you mentioned about leadership kind of wanted me to bring him on this conversation because I think one of the last conversations we had and we talked about this when you went to Mexico with me last year in Torreon,
Hmm.
and so how is the meat industry right now? Specifically the beef industry. I know we talked that we are gonna be less cattle, less cattle. The population was gonna decrease quite a bit, and then that might cause some issues. So I think we can just maybe just for audience a little bit of background on where we're at right now on that.
Yeah, a number of newer plants coming online here, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, and I know smaller plants throughout the country taking advantage of some of the available grants and funding that the government's been able to put forth. And again, reach out to Rob Maddock, Dr. Rob Maddock of the American Meat Science Association, if you're interested in applying for some of that funding and grants. That's his job, is to help get some of this funding into your hands. And so anyway, yeah, the livestock industry itself still very robust, but I would say we're probably walking towards some slightly volatile times as far as pricing is going to go. Meat pricing is definitely going to increase. I'm very bold, but also convinced in saying this going forward for a few years at least. I like to follow weather patterns. I believe that's going to be probably some of our best predictors of livestock pricing and meat pricing ultimately, and we're heading into an El Nino year, and hopefully a couple of years. And what that means is rains are coming back to the Central Plains. We've been in some drought times. If you're not familiar with that, guys, it's been a dry time, especially a really hard time for folks in southern, well, all throughout the Central Plains, but especially southern Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, North Texas, and that's some big cattle populations. Um, that's not just going to affect cattle. We have to remember that that's where a lot of our additional feed grains are going to be grown. And that's going to add to additional costs for our other meat animals. Now, beyond that, let's think a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities, I suppose, that the pork industry is going to be facing here shortly. There was a proposition in California that passed a number of years ago, but it's coming into effect now. And what that means is it's a population density for sows and farrowing, and it's causing the pork industry in the United States to have to retrofit a lot of barns because and I can't recall the specific percentages, but California is a big pork market, and what that's going to do is it's going to make the it's kind of forcing the hands of Iowa pig farmers and Illinois pig farmers to retrofit some of their barns so that they're compliant, so that the pigs being raised there ultimately can then be sold in California. And there's been a lot of discussion about, can one state dictate production practices throughout the rest of the country? And indirectly, the reality is they can, because it's going to come down to is the meat from the animals that are being raised, are those animals being raised according to those particular practices? And this isn't a law discussion, but it is something that we have to be aware of. And so pork prices are about to go up, if they haven't already, and already great demand for that. And so we'll see where things go. Again, agriculture is very dynamic. And folks in agriculture are some of the most resourceful, and we always figure out the problem that comes to us, and so we'll figure this one out too. And there's always going to be a little bit of growing pains, and I just hope that we can continue to produce enough affordable meat for those who still need meat in their diet, would like to have meat in their diet, and maybe don't have quite as much expendable income. And and it's important that we keep that in mind, that we continue to produce meat safely, effectively, and make it sure it tastes good, but then also at a good price. Because if our customers can't afford it, then it's going to be that's a bigger challenge that we have to overcome. So
Yeah, and I think you forgot to mention something about more sustainable as well. And then we've
mhm.
been, I had the opportunity on my role at Ultrasource to travel South America, travel in Mexico, and had the opportunity to also look at and maybe like a more international perspective on the agriculture or animal agriculture, the meat industry. And I think it just continues to grow. I mean, how can we make the meat industry more sustainable? And from all angles, right? From taking into advantage the 100% of the animal, that it's all the way. And we talked many times about this, and I'm probably boring people, but how to, I mean, it's a big issue sometimes when you don't think, even in my work for small and mid-sized meat processors, there is some opportunities for some of the cool products or byproducts that, I mean, calling hide, head, some bones that if they're doing 15, 20 head a day, sometimes for I mean, sometimes it's difficult for the company to come collect those because it may not be worth traveling 150
Yeah,
miles.
it's hard to find rendering for a really small operation. I know that's a struggle for a number of folks out there right now.
Yeah, and it's been, I mean, it's been since, I mean, maybe 3, 4, 5 years that, I mean, the question was brought up, like, what, how can we help these folks? So I think, and this goes back to research again, and some of those alternatives that at least from that angle. I mean, I know we could talk about animal welfare, we could talk about meat quality in terms of pH, like what is the water holding capacity, because when you're talking about some of those plants that process 10, 15,000 head of pigs a day, and just a slight difference in pH, that can be a huge difference in terms of the water that can be uh or migrates out from the muscle. But I guess I like, because you have to approach it from different angles. But I continue to see people, and I like this, that are more interested in how can I utilize all these items that I'm not using right now. Either, like you said, some pet food avenues, some petri and avenues. What I want to say is there may be some opportunities for cooperation between meat processors to maybe not for one, but if you combine 5 or 6 small guys, maybe there can be an opportunity to make like a kind of a rendering option or a petri option. That, I mean, you're looking at some equipment, it can be expensive for that, and especially for those small processors, that can be a challenge sometimes. And I don't know if I'm going off the tangent, but it's just
No, no.
relating to the whole thing. How can we improve from the meat color perspective,
Yeah.
the meat waste at the retail? How can we extend the color life of fresh meat? And then there's some cool projects that we're gonna be having here, hopefully in this fall, about some research of waste of fresh meat waste at the retail level. So there's going to be a good projects and good data. So
Mhm.
a lot of that data we have, that it's 15, 20 years ago. Like, how
Yeah.
much are we wasting?
Yeah. Well, and we do know there's some research out there recently out of Oklahoma State University, Dr. Rom, and he's kind of looked at just meat food loss at retail from a more recent perspective, because we have looked at that a long time ago, but it was time for an update, and so that might be a good discussion for the future, is to talk about that. But beyond it, you've mentioned a number of potential solutions for byproducts, especially for our smaller processors. But it does come down to the reality of some of our smaller processors just don't have the capability to fully utilize those animals, and hope that we have rendering capacity to come pick that offal and hides and bones and things up. There are some solutions out there. Someone I want to interview, and it's a company. It's called Wastewater Panels, and it's kind of a funny name, but they have aerobic digester solutions for smaller plants. It can be a more expensive startup cost, but check that out. It's there again. There's money out there. There's grant opportunities, and it's something that I'm very interested in because, yeah, from a small processor perspective, we need to be able to. It's the right thing to do. We need to be able to utilize that animal fully, and it makes some amazing soil amendment as a result. Yeah, and the larger processors out there, they have rendering on site. It's pretty much a done deal. It's easy for them, and I say easy, air quotes, relatively
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
But they have systems on site to handle that, and they'll have hide wash rooms and brine rooms and things like that to prepare hides for shipment and for the processing. But yeah,
Absolutely.
our smaller processors can struggle sometimes.
And all these concerns we get from you guys. You guys are listening, small processors are listening to this podcast. And these are good, legitimate questions that it make it pose these questions to other faculty or other people in the industry.
Mhm.
Like I would love to have this conversation with these folks that have some solutions for small processors, for like at least some alternatives for them.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to be in Lima, Peru in July, and I went to it was a fairly, like, for being in Peru is a small, well, for being in Peru is a large operation. They're talking maybe 1,000 beef with maybe 500 pig a day. It's very common in Latin America, going
Mhm.
into a plant that they have the beef line, and then they have a pork slaughter line. And these folks, I think it's very unique because they're actually combining some of the offal, some of the co-products from pork and beef to create a bone meal, or to create some products. It was very good to see some old equipment from like 15, 20 years ago, but it's working, and they're getting some good product out there, and it's fulfilling the need for the pet food industry, at least in that part of the world. Um, Again, it just I mean, it's there. So that's an issue, that's a dilemma, and we're trying to do as much as we can. And we invite some of you folks, if you have some questions, not only on rendering, but on anything that we can sit down with some of the leaders, either found in the U.S. or internationally. I mean, we had one of the last episodes, Dr. Bass, we had people outside the U.S. in Guam. Dr. Liu recently had Dr. Dominic from Puerto Rico to give another perspective as well. What's going on in those meat science programs in some areas that, I mean, they're not big as we are right now, and as we are here in the U.S. I don't know. It's good. It's good to be aware of what's going on beyond the borderlines.
Well, and speaking of beyond the borderlines, I'll have to brag a little bit too. So you went to Peru. I went to Italy. Hey, da, 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 da. So had the great opportunity to travel around in the Piedmont region, which, for those who are less familiar with Italy, it's the very top of the boot, to the west, bordering France, and it's a pretty good sized corner of Italy. And they're very, very proud of their particular breed, the Piedmontese breed of beef cattle. Very, very different from what I have experienced. I have forever dabbled in the our traditional British breeds, and for those who are less familiar with the beef side of things, that's our Angus, our Hereford, our Shorthorns, etc. And The Piedmont cattle are a very, very different breed. They're a composite, from many years ago that nature created, essentially, that ended up in that region, and a very lean breed of cattle. But one of their biggest attributes is that they're double muscled cattle, and So by being very lean, we have to think about how can the palatability be affected, because we've talked about this regularly here on the podcast, is that palatability, flavor, tenderness, juiciness is greatly impacted by marbling. To get more of that intramuscular fat into the muscle really accentuates the palatability. Well, this particular breed of cattle, they're super lean, so they don't put a lot of marbling down. But because of the double muscling, which is a very unique gene that they have, and it doesn't mean they have twice as many muscles, but they have a lot more muscle fibers per unit of measure, and so the muscle fibers are very small in comparison, and they're actually very tender as a result. I had the opportunity to go and see a number of these cattle in being raised on the ranches. But then I spent 4 days with Italian butchers, and oh my goodness, that was like a dream come true. And I learned a lot. I learned that we can definitely take a few ideas from the Italians, from the European fabrication, but I would also say that the U.S. has made great strides into that direction as well. And so there's a number of similarities, different names for things, obviously, but a number of similarities. And so it was a cool opportunity for me to kind of compare and contrast between the different fabrication styles. Again, there's only so many muscles in a beef animal, and so there's still a lot of similarities in how they come apart. But my eyes have been opened, um, and I think it warrants additional investigation. Especially, I came back and was working with a Piedmontese breeder here, and wow, I mean there are definitely some great attributes to that particular breed of cattle. Very unique breed of cattle. There's not very many of them in the United States, but I think it's time that we go back and maybe investigate how can they contribute to the overall success of beef, um, yeah, internationally, really. So, yeah, pretty
You,
cool.
did you study any wine in particular as
I
well?
studied some wine. Yeah, I studied a little bit of wine. Actually, it's kind of funny. I was in. It was a it was a part of Italy, and I mean, you can go just about anywhere in Italy and get great wine. But uh, it was two of some of my favorite things in the world: wine and beef. And the Piedmont, the people in the Piedmont region, um, are very proud of their cattle, and they're very proud of their wine too. And some of their wines are internationally renowned. Um, uh, and I'm going to get them all wrong, I'm sure, but I think it's the Nebuloso, the Barolo, and then there's a kind of a drier white called the Arnese. And I'm coming back and talking to folks that I know they know about wine and they haven't even heard of some of these, and it's kind of fun. So anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
good.
other foods go very well, and I include wine as a food, and but other
Absolutely.
foods go great with meat. It's part of the amazing human experience.
Absolutely. Part of our diet for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have one last announcement. We have the Spanish Academy coming up soon here in Kansas City. We're gonna have some folks from international, not only from the U.S. We have some Spanish speaking attendees from the U.S. We have some folks from Mexico, Puerto Rico, Central America, Belize. It's going to be a good one. We host once every year in Spanish. We do 4 or 5 more in English for all the American meat processors mostly.
Mhm.
But this is good. I really invite all of our people listening or listenership to be I mean, just to be watching what some of the new podcasts that we're gonna put. I will guarantee that you're gonna love those.
Hey, oh, one other additional mention. Although I was in Italy, I wasn't there at the same time as the International Congress of Meat Science and Technology, and it's so ICOMST is a an international gathering of meat scientists, and it moves around to different countries every year, similar to the Reciprocal Meat Conference, but definitely more of it on an international scale, and goes to different locations internationally. And but I do know that Colette Castor, and a number of our AMSA members were there in person to represent the United States, the American Meat Science Association, and hopefully gather some new ideas, because that's how we share ideas, is to get together and talk about things. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, looking forward to seeing you again sometime in the fall.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Dr. Bass. We'll see you soon.
All right. Take care.